In November 2010, Channel Enabler's CEO, Braham Shnider, joined with Channel Services Group's VP of Sales, Joby Pearson, in the second of a three-part series of joint webinars. This webinar is focused on the discipline of recruiting the right partners to drive indirect channel success.
Welcome everyone to the second edition of a three-part series focused on channel management and the science of hiring and developing channel partners. Today we'll be focusing on the segment to help you understand the discipline to recruiting the right partners. By the end of this webinar, you will clearly understand what to avoid in your partner recruitment efforts, the required disciplines for partner recruitment best practices, and how to activate the tail of your channel. Now let's move ahead to meet the two channel experts who will be conducting this webinar today. First, we have Braham Shnider, who is the President and CEO of Channel Enablers. Braham began Channel Enablers in 1999 as the founder and president. Braham has over 20 years of sales and marketing experience with technology companies and has held executive roles in all levels of the IT industry. Braham has extensive experience in developing channels to market strategies and has worked in over 30 countries. Braham specializes in channel alliance strategy consulting and operational reviews. He has facilitated many leadership, strategy, and planning workshops for high-tech vendors, and is a regular keynote speaker on channel alliance best practices and run channels and alliance workshops globally. Some of the clients that he's personally worked with include Cisco, EMC, HP, IBM, Oracle, Nokia, Sun Microsystems, SAP, and Symantec. Joby Pearson joins us. He's the Vice President of Sales for Channel Services Group. Joby has 22 years of experience solution selling in small business to enterprise business size accounts, 10 years in business processing outsourcing, and 17 years in sales management. His team of business development managers and program strategists develop and deliver marketing campaigns designed to increase revenue and product awareness within reseller and distribution channels for technology companies. In the past 10 years, Joby has helped design and execute partner sales programs, go-to-market campaigns, and launch marketing initiatives for some of the world's largest technology companies. Because there are a large number of people on this call, this webinar is set up as a one-way audio broadcast only, but we are definitely able to take your questions and comments via chat. For those of you new to this live meeting system who want to send in a question or a comment, simply click on the chat open box at the top right of your screen and type your question in there. At the end of the webinar, we'll have some time for questions and answers, and we'll work through as many questions as we can that are posted. So if you have a question now, I see that we have some questions already coming in. If you have a question or a comment, please go ahead and send them to us at any time. And now I would like to hand off to Braham to begin the educational webinar, The Discipline to Recruiting the Right Partners. Take it away, Braham.
Thank you very much, Tina, and good afternoon, everybody, or maybe good morning to some of you as well, potentially. Some very familiar names I see on the line today and some new ones, so I would like to make you very welcome. As Tina mentioned, this is one of a three-part series, and really what we're trying to do, or the discussion that we had is that unlike other industries such as automotive and pharmaceutical and financial services and many others, there's a long tail of partners, of unproductive partners, what we see in the high-tech space, and which is not common practice in many of these other industries. So we've come up with a fundamental hypothesis. There are other contributing reasons, but we believe the three major contributing reasons is that you've got partners who aren't facing what are your growth markets, and therefore you've got inappropriate coverage. There may be not the appropriate discipline to recruiting and reviewing your existing partners. And thirdly, around telling partner investment propositions. The channel coverage topic we've already covered, and that's available on our websites as a recorded webcast. The discipline to recruiting the right partners, as Tina mentioned, is what we're covering today. And on December, you'll also see that we're going to be covering how to develop compelling partner investment propositions and getting partners to do the things that you would to do and get them involved. So let's begin with a couple fast facts. The useful life of a partner, particularly in mature markets, we don't have as much data in emerging markets, is 4 years. And so what we define as being a useful life is where the partner and the vendor would both acknowledge that the partnership is a success for them and they're both making money. There's a lot of contributing reasons to these 4 years, and some of those will become more abundant or more obvious as we go through the webinar. The other fast fact here is that channel partners are no different to almost anybody that sells to a set of customers, and that is they get most of their revenue from the same customers in the same way that most of you on the phone also get your revenue from the same customers. Our data suggests that about 88% of their revenue comes from their current customers. So what's the implication of these two data points? Well, one major implication, at least, is that we know that, particularly after our last webcast, that it's critical that vendors focus on new markets. They may be new product segments, new customer segments, moving into new geographies. There's a whole lot of different ways to define new markets. But more than ever, there is a greater need to push into new sectors, new segments. So the probability of success, taking into account particularly the second point, around 88% of partners selling into their install base, of using your existing partners as you go into these market segments is a very high-risk strategy. And the probability of success, therefore, is very low. So the implication is that recruitment is a continuous focus. It's not something that stopped and started and stopped and started, but it should be a continuous process, a never-ending cycle. And the analogy I like to draw here, is, when you go to some of these very large airports and you're going from terminal to terminal and they have these very long conveyor belts or escalator belts, the way I like to characterize it is if you imagine the available market segment you're going after is that conveyor belt. And so ideally from a coverage perspective, you'd like to have a partner every 2 or 3 yards all the way along, and so you know that you're not missing opportunities and you're not too crowded in one particular area. The reality, though, is if you're not doing continuous recruitment and also continuous pruning of your existing partner community, what happens is that you'll find as partners reach the end of the conveyor belt, they're going to have to start walking backwards. And so they're going to start bumping into other partners. And so you're going to start to have a concentration at one end. If you're not adding partners at the other end of the conveyor belt, eventually you're going to find all those partners moving, somewhat across, and you're going to have very little coverage. And so I said, you're going to have this concentration. And this is where we see a lot of our customers today, is they have they have a high concentration of partners in industries that they've generally been successful in, but they've got very little coverage of some of these emerging markets because their existing partners are not capable or are not able or not willing to do that. And so when we talk about continuous coverage, I want you to think about this analogy of always having this conveyor belt and having an even number of partners covering that market opportunity. So some traps to avoid as you go to and move into some of these new markets. Too often we see vendors trying to push their existing partners into new markets, as we were just describing. Or on the other side, sometimes we see partners who also questioning their own worth, ask vendors for money or resources to help them enter into new markets. To me, that's always a major red flag that you've got a problem with the partner. But either way, both these scenarios are dangerous. So partners will struggle to be successful changing market areas they've not focused on in the past. And as I said, research suggests that most reseller partners generate most of their income from their installed base. In time, some partners do add new market focus areas to their business. Clearly, they do. Not everybody is static. But developing the capability to sell to new markets will cost them a lot more than selling more products into their existing customers. And so, it's your ability to identify partners that have the sufficient motivation, the skills, the resources, the working capital to succeed with this change. So watch out. It's going to cost one of you if you push them into these new markets. Another trap to also consider is at times vendors ask partners to change the way that they also sell. So a very common example today is that they'll ask a partner who's only ever sold complex products or enterprise products to move more into a mid-market, volume-oriented sort of play. Another example, which is very current, is that people are asking, moving away from more, product, license, margin models to more of an annuity-based cloud model. So both of these, are current examples, as people move more into SMB and move more into cloud. The implication here is that most partners can't or should not make the changes being asked because they're not necessarily capable of. And so the real red flag here is to watch out what you're asking your partners to do, because loyal partners just might do as you're asked. And the industry is littered with examples of partners that have been loyal and have followed and done as their vendors have requested, and have suffered the consequences. In the extreme case, putting themselves out of business many times. And this is a very common practice that we've seen throughout sort of the history of the high-tech space. So continuous partner selection. So just like prospecting, for new business, in direct sales, partner recruitment, is something that you should work at continuously. Because, as I said, partners will slide away over time. You'll have partners that will change their interests, will change their focus areas. What is effective in what they're doing currently? Your requirements will change. You'll go into new markets. You'll have more complexity or less complexity in your products. Your customer needs will also change. As time progresses, what they're purchasing, in terms of a product set, the same product set, becomes simpler. And so they won't necessarily need all of the services that are wrapped earlier on when they were first buying the same sort of product set. And your partner selection criteria will also need to be updated regularly, because your requirements will change, the market will change. And they're a great way to not just evaluate new partners and the appropriateness of new partners, and we're going to talk a lot more about partner selection criteria a little bit later, but also a great way to evaluate your existing partners and identify where the gaps are in performance. Because too often, and we get onto business planning, but too often business planning is done in isolation from what are the performance gaps inside of your existing partners, and that shouldn't be the case. So when you think about channel selection, going back to excuse me, what we were talking about last week or in the last webinar is you've really got to understand where your target market is, where your hotspots are, where your growth is going to come from. Once you've done that, you can start to work backwards from the end user to find what it is that all of those customers need. You can then start to define some roles and responsibilities of success that you would like your channel partners to do. Because there's always several channel options, but the reality is that the most economic channel, the one that can deliver what the customer needs at the lowest cost, will always dominate over time. And so I use a very simple example of when you're releasing a product. Earlier on, direct sales may be the most efficient channel because nobody else can really do it other than you. Then eventually you introduce maybe a services channel because you can't scale and you can't provide all the services that you need. And so to lower your costs, you bring in a services channel. Eventually you start to bring in more of a VAR style channel. And then you move into more things like two-tier distribution and agent-based or telephone-based sales. Why you do that is very simple, because the needs of the customer have changed. They know what they need. The product is simplified, and so you have different channels coming along the way that provide what the customer needs at that lower cost. And so the implication again here is if you're staying static with the same sort of channels when you first launched your product, and your product's developed a long way along the technology adoption life cycle curve, then it's likely that you're pushing inappropriate channels, uneconomic channels, against competitors who likely have much more economic or more economic channels. So the most obvious channels are not always the best channels to consider. Here's a question that, this question is somewhat theoretical, and I acknowledge that, but here's a question we often ask, and it's trying to demonstrate a point. And the question is excuse me, is it better to recruit 100 partners where you end up with only 5 that are eventually productive? Or is it better to recruit only 10 partners and you end up with 5 that are eventually productive?